I'm Sarah Davis, and you're watching Fight News Now Extra. Coming up next in our MMA headlines, Jon Jones returns to the doctor, and Brock Lesnar is welcome anywhere. The MMA panel will be on in just a few, so let's get started with our newsmakers. So we all remember how close Vitor Belfort came to armbarring light heavyweight Jon Jones at UFC 152. Belfort even said he heard a pop in Jones's arm, and after getting it checked out in Toronto, Jones said his elbow was strained. Now Jones's camp is saying he's getting a second look at it in Los Angeles because the first one may have been incomplete, and we'll keep you posted on the results. Now, Dana White has said he would welcome former UFC heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar back to the promotion with open arms, and the WWE's personality Paul Heyman says, of course he would, why not? Heyman says his friend Lesnar is a huge pay-per-view draw, which means money, money, money for the UFC or any other sports franchise for that matter. So there are your newsmakers, and now it's time to hear from our chatty MMA panel of John Pollock, John Ramdeen, and Robin Black. And guys, something you haven't been talking about lately is Bellator. Why is that?
Well, because right now, Sarah, this is the lame duck season of Bellator. Season 7 right now, their last season on MTV2 before they go over to Spike in January, where that to me is where everyone's attention is right now, and they're simply fulfilling a contract at this point before the move over. Friday's heavyweight show, I've got to say, we got 2 impressive knockouts there from Richard Hale, Vinicius Queiroz looking very good, but my God, Eric Prindle and Thiago Santos have to just be the most cursed combination in MMA history.
Doomed. It was tit for tat. That's why Prindle did it. You hit me in the balls. I'm hitting you in the balls.
That was the most pain I have ever seen on a man in my life.
Man, every male has been hit in the, how does Morrow put it?
Another
the peninsula south of the border. And everybody's been hit there. It's not good, but when a 265-pound plus man hits you in the groin, it's bad news, man.
How about Brett Rogers? I think this guy is done in terms of high-level mixed martial arts at this point in the game. He looked horrendous on Friday night. I was with Jimmy Smith. Those last 2 rounds, I think the guy was there in body only. He was just simply going through the motions in those 2 rounds, and that's not to say that he was doing a whole lot in round number 1 either.
Yeah, the thing about Brett Rogers is, you know, you're only as good as your last performance. Yes, it wasn't the best performance we've seen of Brett Rogers, and maybe in the future we'll see some improvements from Brett Rogers. I mean, this guy has faced some good talent in the past. He looked good facing Fedor and Andrei Arlovsky. He just has to get back on the wheel. He has to not believe the hype. He has to believe that he is.
There's no hype right now. I don't think there's any hype attached to Brett Rogers.
He still keeps getting gigs. So right now, the Bellator heavyweight division is like the UFC's heavyweight division was like 5 years ago. Yeah. They're developing it, and if Brett Rogers can find his way, he could find a place in Bellator.
Well, first of all, you are Captain Understatement if you said that wasn't the best performance, because that was a terrible performance. But I'm also not quite willing to say the guy's done yet either. I mean, he has performed at a high level. He's big, he's explosive, he's powerful. But, you know, when you go through all that unpleasantness with, you know, domestic abuse and that stuff, we don't really give you a lot of second chances in that scenario. And, you know, he may be done in that
Let's not forget, he's coming out of working here with ATT. He got with a high-level camp in preparation for this fight, and looked bad. He looked really bad on Friday.
Yeah, but that's also because, you know, he has to make a couple of adjustments. You go there, it doesn't mean that you're going to gel with the team on day 1 or day 2. You have to get used to their routines. You have to get used to the way they do things, and maybe he's just not there yet.
We look ahead to the season, though, and I mean, looking up to Friday, we've got Eddie Alvarez in what could be his final Bellator fight, and very likely his last fight with the organization, taking on Patricky Pitbull Freite. I think with Eddie Alvarez, he is, to me, the most legitimate star this company has created since day 1 in 2009, and I think losing him, I think it does hurt the perception of Bellator.
I think you're right. I mean, and you put it well at the beginning when you said, you know, this is kind of the lame duck season. They are making adjustments to try to start hitting home runs on Spike, and Spike hates the UFC, and it's like breaking up with a girl and the ex-girlfriend decides, I'm going to get even with you by having sex with Bellator. That's what Spike is looking to do, and they want it to work. It's a bit of a drag to lose Eddie Alvarez.
Yeah, they're just keeping the wheels in motion. It's just right now, they're just hoping that this season is over, they get on Spike TV, and I would not be surprised if they offered Eddie Alvarez a big contract, and Eddie Alvarez might take it. He can go and he can fight.
I think they should. I think just the statement of being able to keep a guy that we've kind of written off as UFC bound, I think that helps the perception. If I'm Viacom, I'm kicking in those extra dollars to keep this homegrown talent that they have cultivated for all these years. And not just hand them over to the competition.
And Alvarez is worth it, man. Like, yes, they've developed him, but Japan is where we really saw what he was capable of. So first they had to find him, recognize that he was as legitimate as we believe he was, and then develop him. They've done all of that, and he's a star, and they really do need to keep him. Although, if he goes to the UFC, man, I'd like to see him versus Joe Lozon in the first fight and go from there. It'd be a lot of fun.
That's the thing. I think he's smart enough. He wants to be in this for the long haul, and if he can take some big dollars to fight guys that are not on the UFC's level, he's going to take it. He's a family man. He has some mouths to feed.
I think this is also one of the few arguments you can make, maybe not one of the few, against the tournament, in that Eddie Alvarez, I think the fight everyone wanted to see was a rematch with Chandler, and putting him back at square one and going through the tournament, it is going to be a bit of a turnoff to guys who, for Eddie Alvarez, he doesn't want to go face rank and file lightweight in the opening round in hopes of eventually getting that rematch.
I'm going to cut you guys off because first and foremost, the UFC did not have any formats back in the day. It was big guy versus little guy. Bellator can adapt, and they can put super fights on. You don't have to worry about the tournament. They can change things.
This is a good argument for the UFC as whole. There is no structure approach.
Sarah loves tournaments, right, Sarah?
Yeah, Pollock, one-night tournaments are my favorite. Thanks, guys. So all week leading up to UFC 153, Silva versus Bonner, we'll be airing the UFC's official countdown to the card. Visit your local listings or our website for the schedule. Just hop on to FightNetwork.com. Coming up next on Fight News Now Extra, we have a recap of UFC on FX5.